for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson. I am the founder and lead host of this show, as well as its executive producer. You'll be hearing my voice for the next couple of weeks as Jack Prince and Katie Steele take some time off for the holidays. Before we get started with today's topics, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or Reason.fm by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can hear us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica station. Our quote of the week comes from former President Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "Keep your eyes on the stars and your feet on the ground." So that's where Casey Kasem got that. Oh boy. I've been wanting to talk about our first story for a couple of weeks now. This is Lauren Hepler writing for the San Francisco Chronicle. This is dated December 5th. Paul Austin thought things were going well when the appraiser came to his Marin City home last January. The appraiser complimented the views of the San Francisco Bay, and he was sure to point out all the improvements, Austin recalled at an October 13th meeting of a state reparations task force. So he and his wife, Tanisha Tate Austin, were shocked when the appraisal valued their home at $995,000, nearly $500,000 less than another appraisal 10 months earlier. The couple, who are black, got a second opinion last February. This time they asked a white friend named Jan to sit at the kitchen island and pretend to be the homeowner. They also whitewashed their home by hiding art and family photos. That appraiser said their house was worth $1,482,500. The $487,500 discrepancy between the two 2020 appraisals pushed the couple to file a fair housing lawsuit in federal district court this week against appraiser Jeanette Miller, her firm Miller and Parati Real Estate Appraisers Incorporated, and national appraisal company AMC Links LLC. It's the latest escalation in a series of similar cases of alleged racial bias in the home appraisal process as California property owners move to reap financial gains from record home prices. Austin told the Reparations Task Force in a panel on the racial wealth gap in October, quote, "We did our homework. We believe the white lady wanted to devalue our property because we are in a black neighborhood and the home belonged to a black family." End of quote. Miller's firm and AMC Links did not respond to requests for comment. Researchers at the Brookings Institution have found that owner-occupied homes in majority black U.S. neighborhoods are undervalued by an average $48,000 per home, representing some $156 billion with a B dollars in cumulative losses, a dynamic that has prompted calls for policy reform to automate more of the home valuation process and otherwise minimize bias. Some in the appraisal industry, meanwhile, contend that the process is inherently subjective and driven by extreme pressure to increase home values opening appraisers to unfair personal liability when homeowners disagree with the results. I'm going to stop right here for a quick minute. Automating the process is not going to help the issue, because here's what happens when you automate. Somebody still has to put that data in. That means that the person entering the data is going to have their own biases. Automating the process does not fix the issue because of the inherent bias of the person entering the data into the computer. Let me continue. In the case of the Austin family, the large appraisal discrepancy illustrates how even Bay Area residents able to purchase a home in one of the nation's most expensive real estate markets can be shut out of some of the massive wealth generated by increasing property values. The Austin family bought the home in late 2016 for $550,000, according to the lawsuit. And Austin said they spent around $400,000 expanding the footprint, renovating the interior, and adding features like an outdoor deck and an in-law unit with bay views. With the higher second appraisal designed to take race out of the equation, the home is now worth nearly triple what they paid 5 years ago. Stopping there because, again, it really hasn't tripled in value, because they originally paid $550,000 for the house, but they added $400,000 to it. So that's a total of $950,000. Because the value is now $1.4 million, the actual increase in the value of the home is only $500,000. You know, there is such a thing as math. Continuing the story, Julia Howard Gibbon of Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California, the couple's attorney, said, quote, "There are definitely things about this complaint that are uniquely strong. They erase themselves from the home, essentially," end of quote. Though similar cases with extreme differences in appraisal values have also surfaced in Oakland, Stockton, and other California cities with large black populations, the new lawsuit revolves around the North Bay's unique racial dynamics. Austin knows firsthand that Marin City, an unincorporated area wedged between affluent Sausalito and Mill Valley, grew out of the pre-World War II migration of tens of thousands of black workers seeking employment around the Sausalito shipyard. His own grandparents lived and worked there. Though they saved money to move to other areas of Marin County, Austin said in his October testimony they were unable to buy property elsewhere because of exclusionary practices like discriminatory bank lending and racial covenants. What is a racial covenant? That is language in the deed that says that the property will not be sold to a person of color. So it's basically codified racism. Racial covenants ought to be banned totally, everywhere. Let me continue. The fact that his family encountered what seemed like a new version of the same old problem more than a half-century later, he said at the October meeting, made him feel ill. Quote, "My stomach hurt, my head hurt, just because of what we went through. I don't wish that on anybody," end of quote. Attorneys for the couple argue in the new lawsuit that, quote, "Marin County has a long history of undervaluation based on stereotypes, redlining, discriminatory appraisal standards, and actual or perceived racial demographics," end of quote. By focusing the first appraisal only on the small number of homes sold in the immediate Marin City area, Howard Gibbon said the appraiser built an invisible barrier around the home by comparing it only to other sale prices in a long marginalized area, a result she called recycled discrimination. The plaintiffs are seeking a jury trial, financial damages, and a court order directing the appraisers to take action to ensure the issues in the complaint are not repeated. Austin said at the October meeting that he is also focused on ongoing issues like recent desegregation orders issued for Marin County schools. He still can't help but notice that neighbors' homes on smaller lots have already crept up to values around $1.6 or $1.7 million. He said, quote, "Yes, I do want to see a change. I do not want to see my children have to deal with this," end of quote. And they shouldn't have to. Racism is disgusting, and this is how the system is. It was built this way. There's nothing wrong with the system, The system is working as it was designed to do. The problem is, it was designed to be a racist system to begin with. So the system's working properly for those in power. The system needs to be thrown out and replaced. And I hope the Austin family is able to do that in San Francisco. I also want to get to my next story here. This is Stephen Shankland writing for CNET.com. This is dated December 3rd. It's a doozy of a case in digital spying. Security researchers have revealed evidence of attempted or successful installations of Pegasus, software made by Israel-based cybersecurity company NSO Group, on 37 phones belonging to activists, rights workers, journalists, and business people. They appear to have been targets of secret surveillance by software that's intended to help governments pursue criminals and terrorists. One of the most powerful objections to Pegasus came from the U.S. government, and now one reason for the wrath could have emerged. The spyware was found on the phones of at least 9 State Department employees whom Apple notified about the hack, according to a report from Reuters. The officials were either based in Uganda or involved in matters associated with the African country, but it's unclear who hacked the phones, the report said, citing unnamed sources. The New York Times corroborated the report, saying at least 11 employees were affected. Pegasus has been a politically explosive issue that's put Israel under pressure from activists and from governments worried about misuse of the software. In November, the U.S. federal government took much stronger action, blocking sale of U.S. technology to NSO by putting the company on the government's entity list. NSO has suspended some countries' Pegasus privileges, but has sought to defend its software and controls it tries to place on its use. Apple sued NSO Group in November, seeking to bar the company's software from being used on Apple devices, require NSO to locate and delete any private data its app collected, and disclose the profits from its operations. Apple software chief Craig Federighi said, quote, "Private companies developing state-sponsored spyware have become even more dangerous," end of quote. The phones were on an activist organization's list of more than 50,000 phone numbers for politicians, judges, lawyers, teachers, and others. Also on that list are 10 prime ministers, 3 presidents, and a king. That is according to an international investigation released in mid-July by the Washington Post and other media outlets, though there's no proof that being on the list means an attack was attempted or successful. Pegasus is the latest example of how vulnerable we all are to digital prying. Our phones store our most personal information, including photos, text messages, and emails. Spyware can reveal directly what's going on in our lives, bypassing the encryption that protects data sent over the internet. The 50,000 phone numbers are connected to phones around the world, though NSO disputes the link between the list and actual phones targeted by Pegasus. The devices of dozens of people close to Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador were on the list, as well as those belonging to reporters at CNN, the Associated Press, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Several phones on the list, including one belonging to Claude Mangan, the French wife of a political activist jailed in Morocco, were infected or attacked. Other cases of Pegasus infection have emerged since the initial revelations. Here's what you need to know about Pegasus. What is NSO Group? It's a company that licenses surveillance software to government agencies. The company says its Pegasus software provides a valuable service because encryption technology has allowed criminals and terrorists to go dark. The software runs secretly on smartphones, shedding light on what their owners are doing. Other companies provide similar software. Chief Executive Shalev Julio co-founded the company in 2010. NSO also offers other tools to locate where a phone is being used, defend against drones, and mine law enforcement data to spot patterns. NSO has been implicated by previous reports and lawsuits and other hacks, including a reported hack of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos in 2018. A Saudi dissident sued the company in 2018 for its alleged role in hacking a device belonging to journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who had been murdered inside the Saudi embassy in Turkey that year. What is Pegasus? Pegasus is NSO's best-known product. It can be installed remotely without a surveillance target ever having to open a document or website link, according to the Washington Post. Pegasus reveals all to the NSO consumers who control it: text messages, photos, emails, videos, contact list, and can record phone calls. It can also secretly turn on a phone's microphone and cameras to create new recordings, according to the Washington Post. General security practices like updating your software and using two-factor authentication can help keep mainstream hackers at bay, but protection is really hard when expert, well-funded attackers concentrate their resources on an individual. Pegasus isn't supposed to be used to go after activists, journalists, and politicians. The company says on its website, NSO Group licenses its products only to government intelligence and law enforcement agencies for the sole purpose of preventing and investigating terror and serious crime. Our vetting process goes beyond legal and regulatory requirements to ensure the lawful use of our technology as designed. Just because a company says that that's the reason why they've developed the software doesn't mean, one, that they're telling the truth, or two, that it's being used for other nefarious purposes, and they're hiding it. Let me continue. Human rights group Amnesty International, however, documents in detail how it traced compromised smartphones to NSO Group. Citizen Lab, a Canadian security organization at the University of Toronto, said it independently validated Amnesty International's conclusions after examining phone backup data. In September, though, Apple fixed a security hole that Pegasus exploited for installation on iPhones. Malware often uses collections of such vulnerabilities to gain a foothold on a device and then expand privileges to become more powerful. NSO Group software also runs on Android phones. Why is Pegasus in the news? Forbidden Stories, a Paris journalism nonprofit, and Amnesty International, a human rights group, shared with 17 news organizations a list of more than 50,000 phone numbers for people believed to be of interest to NSO customers. The news sites confirmed the identities of many of the individuals on the list and infections on their phones. Of data from 67 phones on the list, 37 exhibited signs of Pegasus installation or attempted installation, according to the Washington Post. Of those 37 phones, 34 were Apple iPhones. The list of 50,000 phone numbers includes French President Emmanuel Macron, Iraqi President Barham Salih, and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Also on the list are 7 former prime ministers and 3 current ones: Pakistan's Imran Khan, Egypt's Mustafa Madbouli, and Morocco's Saad Eddine El Othmani. King Mohammed VI of Morocco also is on the list. The episode hasn't helped Apple's reputation when it comes to device security. Federighi said, quote, "We take any attack on our users very seriously," end of quote. The company said it'll donate $10 million in any damages from the lawsuit to organizations that are advocating for privacy and are pursuing research on online surveillance. That's a drop in the bucket for Apple, which reported a profit of $20.5 billion with a B dollars for its most recent quarter. But it can be significant for much smaller organizations like Citizen Lab. Whose phones did Pegasus infect? In addition to Mangan, 2 journalists at Hungarian investigative outlet Direct36 had infected phones. That's according to a report from The Guardian. A Pegasus attack was launched on the phone of Hanan El-Attar, wife of murdered Saudi columnist Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post said, though it wasn't clear if the attack succeeded. But the spyware did make it onto the phone of Khashoggi's fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, shortly after his death. 7 people in India were found with infected phones, including 5 journalists and 1 advisor to the opposition party critical of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. That is, again, according to the Washington Post. And 6 people working for Palestinian human rights groups had Pegasus-infected phones, Citizen Lab reported in November. What are the consequences of the Pegasus situation? The U.S. cut off NSO Group as a customer of U.S. products, A serious move given that the company needs computer processors, phones, and developer tools that often come from U.S. companies. The Commerce Department said that NSO, quote, supplied spyware to foreign governments that used it to maliciously target government officials, journalists, business people, activists, academics, and embassy workers. These tools have also enabled foreign governments to conduct transnational repression, end of quote. French President Macron changed one of his mobile phone numbers and requested new security checks, Politico reported. He convened a national security meeting to discuss the issue. Macron also raised Pegasus concerns with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, calling for the country to investigate NSO and Pegasus. That's according to a report from The Guardian. The Israeli government must approve export licenses for Pegasus. Israel created a review commission to look into the Pegasus situation, and on July 28th, Israeli defense authorities inspected NSO offices in person. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said if the allegations are verified, that Pegasus use is, quote, completely unacceptable, end of quote. She added this, quote, freedom of media, free press is one of the core values of the EU, end of quote. The Nationalist Congress Party in India demanded an investigation of Pegasus use. Edward Snowden, who in 2013 leaked information about U.S. National Security Agency surveillance practices, called for a ban on spyware sales in an interview with The Guardian. He argued that such tools otherwise will soon be used to spy on millions of people. Snowden said, quote, when we're talking about something like an iPhone, they're all running the same software around the world. So if they find a way to hack one iPhone, they found a way to hack all of them. End of quote. Which is very scary. What does NSO have to say about this? NSO acknowledges the software can be misused. It cut off 2 customers in the last 12 months because of concerns about human rights abuses, according to the Washington Post. In a June transparency report, the company said this, to date, NSO has rejected over U.S. $300 million in sales opportunities as a result of its human rights review processes. However, NSO strongly challenges any link to the list of phone numbers. In a statement, the company said, quote, there is no link between the 50,000 numbers to NSO Group or Pegasus, end of quote. Julio told the Washington Post, quote, every allegation about misuse of the system is concerning me. It violates the trust that we give customers. We are investigating every allegation, end of quote. In a statement, NSO denied false claims about Pegasus that it said were, quote, based on misleading interpretation of leaked data, end of quote. The company added that Pegasus, quote, cannot be used to conduct cyber surveillance within the United States, end of quote. Bullshit. Regarding the alleged infection of State Department phones, NSO Group did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but it told Reuters it canceled relevant accounts, is investigating, and will take legal action if it finds misuse. NSO will try to reverse the U.S. government's sanction. An NSO spokesperson said, quote, we look forward to presenting the full information regarding how we have the world's most rigorous compliance and human rights programs that are based in the American values we deeply share, which already resulted in multiple terminations of contacts with government agencies that misused our products. End of quote. Again, bullshit. I don't believe them. The Washington Post reported that in the past, NSO has also blocked Saudi Arabia, Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and some Mexican government agencies from using the software. How can I tell if my phone has been infected? Amnesty International released an open-source utility called MVT, Mobile Verification Toolkit, that's designed to detect traces of Pegasus. The software runs on a personal computer and analyzes data, including backup files exported from an iPhone or Android phone. Well, I just might have to try and run MVT on my phone, and we'll see what it comes up with. This should be real interesting. I want to get to our next story. This is Eric Gardner writing for The Hollywood Reporter. This is dated December 13th. Ingo Rademacher, long-running actor on ABC's soap opera General Hospital, is now suing the network after being dismissed from the soap for his refusal to be vaccinated for COVID-19. According to a complaint filed Monday in Los Angeles Superior Court, the network refused to accommodate his religious objections. ABC is among many employers in the entertainment industry and beyond now mandating vaccines for its workers. Rademacher said he requested a religious objection to the mandate only to be subjected to, quote, half an hour of cross-examination about his religious beliefs, end of quote. He claims he has a right to bodily integrity as well as a right to informational privacy. Whatever bodily integrity and informational privacy means. His suit aims to hold ABC accountable for alleged discrimination. On what grounds? Here, I got a challenge for all of you out there. I want you to point out in the Bible, I want it in writing, point it out where it says in the Bible not to be vaccinated. Book, chapter, and verse. You show me where, then I might start believing your religious exemptions. Let me continue here. The actor who played Jasper Jacks on General Hospital may face a challenging legal road ahead. Just as Rademacher filed, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to intervene against New York's own requirement that the state's healthcare workers be vaccinated regardless of religious objections. 3 of the conservative justices voted to take up the case, and Neil Gorsuch authored a 14-page dissent bemoaning those losing jobs for sincerely held religious reasons, but the High Court has now repeatedly refused to step in against vaccine mandates. Rademacher's suit attempts to paint vaccination as controversial, though as the nation deals with the latest Omicron variant, more than 80% of individuals ages 12 and up have received at least one shot. ABC has yet to comment about Rademacher's lawsuit. Ingo Rademacher wasn't the only one who was fired from the soap opera. Steve Burton, the actor who has played Jason Morgan on General Hospital for 3 decades, was also fired because he objected to getting a mandatory vaccine. What the hell is wrong with these people? That's what I'd like to know. I've got an argument for every objection. Oh, it's religious. Point it out in the Bible, book, chapter, and verse, like I said. Point it out. Show it to me. Oh, body autonomy. Yeah, let me give you this constitutional concept of rights. Your rights end where mine begin. You don't have the right to pollute the air with your germs and get me sick. If you cough on me, that's assault. I have the right to ball up my fist and punch you in the face. That's self-defense. It's plain as simple. An old friend of mine, Wayne Bush, out in Oklahoma City, on his Facebook page, shared a political cartoon that was inked by Mike Lukovich at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's Joe Biden standing outside the White House wearing a mask, and there's a guy in a maggot hat screaming at President Biden, saying, I won't wear a mask and won't get vaccinated. And why haven't you ended the pandemic? The thing is, and I responded to him, I said, this is the, I would say, mindset of these clowns, but evil, violent, conservative savages don't have minds. Really, they're like the Walking Dead. They're zombies with no brains. They're looking for brains. Folks, you want to know how you end this pandemic once and for all? Get vaccinated. Wear a mask. And quit complaining. Do your part for this country. The only time this country ever comes together anymore is when there's a war. Is that going to be next? Hell, I don't even think that'll bring the country together anymore. We're too deeply divided, and I tell you what, it's the evil, violent, conservative savages that have created the chasm, starting with Ronald Reagan in 1981, and even before then, back in the 60s when he got rid of free college in California because he didn't want those goddamn hippies at Berkeley to get a free education, direct quote. Then it continued with Rush Limbaugh. Then it continued with all these other Rush Limbaugh imitators like Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and all these other talking heads that say a lot while they're saying nothing. There's a lot of words, but there's no substance. It's disgusting. I saw a post on Twitter today. Woman posted that in Ireland, 95% of the country is vaccinated. They wear their masks. They have to prove that they're vaccinated when they go out to the restaurants or grocery stores or wherever. And they don't complain about it. What's the correlation there? Fox Propaganda Channel has been banned from that country for years. And she has one question. What the hell is wrong with the USA? It's a question that I ask as well. What's wrong with us? I know the answer. It's violent conservatism. There is the fix for it all. Get rid of it. There's your answer. Violent conservatism. The easiest solutions are the simplest ones. I'm a firm believer in that. I'm a firm believer in Popper's paradox of tolerance. We have tolerated the intolerable for far too long, and it needs to end now. And since we're on the topic of vaccinations, I might as well put an exclamation point on what I just said. This is an opinion piece written by John Pavlovitz. This was dated August 5th, but I think it's very important. Here's what he wrote then. I can't believe we're still here. I can't believe that we're entering the second full year of this unfathomable madness. We are, and we don't need to be. Here in America, we have enough vaccines for every adult here. The embarrassment of riches most nations on this planet are literally begging for, and nearly half of our people are simply refusing them. Despite how many have already died, despite the fear and lack and grieving of the past 18 months, despite all the time we've missed with people we love, despite every desperate plea from educated people who have spent their lives so that we could be prepared for a moment like this, despite how relentlessly they demanded that we open America, they are saying no to the help that we have all been waiting 2 years for. They are saying no to compassion for other people. It doesn't matter to them that the variants are replicating with startling speed and velocity. It doesn't matter that the ICUs are overflowing again, that cancer patients are having to postpone surgeries due to hospital shortages, that children are increasingly getting sick and dying. Nothing moves the needle of their hearts enough to perform the simplest act on behalf of millions of people they share this nation with and can help keep safe and alive. Selfishness is America's second deadly virus, and it may be one we cannot overcome. It will be here far longer than COVID or its variants, because it was here before them. I wish there was a vaccine that can make these people give a damn about other human beings, that we could inoculate them against whatever toxic cocktail of ignorance, fear, arrogance, political tribalism, and bad religion that has rendered them resistant to the suffering of others. I suppose this shouldn't have been a surprise. I imagine their denials of the virus and their refusal to mask and their defiance of safeguards should have tipped me off. But still, I did not expect this entrenched and strident refusal to help other people, especially the many who claim to follow a love your neighbor Jesus. I guess I expected too much from America. When this nightmare began, I truly imagined that this would eventually be our finest hour, that we would be fully invested in one another in ways we hadn't been in decades, that we would all recognize our interdependence, that we would set aside every political affiliation and religious agenda and do the kinds of sacrificial acts America had been known for in times of war. When the vaccines were launched, I felt a cathartic wave of relief, believing that we would soon be living lives that somewhat resembled what they looked like 2 years ago, that by now some semblance of normalcy would have returned. Instead, we are facing another flood of outbreaks, another school year decimated by sicknesses and stoppages, another season of postponed visits and interrupted plans, another winter of unimaginable death. And the stomach-turning thing about it all is that it isn't being driven by some invisible, insidious virus that floats through the air, but passed person to person by our family members and neighbors and co-workers, by the people we share this nation with, those we rely on to do the right thing, those our health and livelihoods and futures are tethered to. We cannot escape them or defeat them, and so we are victims of them. The penalty for their recklessness we will pay too. The human collateral damage of their destructive choices will be ours as well. That is going to be the story here of these years. Not of the faceless public health threat that attacked this nation and the world, but of the cruelty and selfishness of those we know and love and live with, who gave it every opportunity to ravage us, who were willing accomplices to the death and the suffering, who said no to compassion when it called. Until love and mercy and kindness take hold in the hearts of these people, until they are burdened with the common good, that lack of empathy will be a sickness that will destroy us. And he is 100% right. Bravo to John Pavlovitz for writing that. He summed up everything in such a succinct piece than I ever could. Right now I want to go to our next story. This is Monique Beals writing for The Hill. This is dated December 14th. We have talked about the growth of atheism and agnosticism in the United States. Well, we have an update to this. A Pew Research Center poll published Tuesday indicates that the number of people in the U.S. who describe themselves as religiously unaffiliated increased by 6 points in the last 5 years and 10 points in the last decade. According to the Pew Research Center survey, when asked about their religious identity, 29% of respondents, or about 3 in 10 U.S. adults, said they had none, meaning they were atheist, agnostics, or nothing in particular. Elizabeth Drescher, an adjunct professor at Santa Clara University, told the Associated Press, quote, "If the unaffiliated were a religion, they'd be the largest religious group in the United States." End of quote. Drescher said that the religiously unaffiliated previously resided mostly in urban and coastal communities, but now are spread across the country. Christians, including Protestants, Catholics, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Orthodox Christians still make up a majority of the U.S. population, the survey indicates. Specifically, they account for 63% of the adult population, a 12 percentage point decrease compared to data from 2011. While the percentage of Catholic U.S. adults has remained relatively steady, accounting for about 21% of the population since 2014, the population of Protestant adults declined to 40% this year, down 4 points in the last 5 years. Less than half of respondents, 45%, report praying once a day, compared to 58% in a 2007 survey. The Pew survey included 3,937 respondents and was conducted from May 29th to August 25th. It has a margin of error of plus or minus 2.1 percentage points. Which brings me to this point, no pun intended. If atheists make up 29% of the United States, or none of the above, let's just call it that. If nearly 1/3 of this country doesn't believe, and 21% of this country is Catholic, why does the U.S. Supreme Court have 7 of 9 justices that are Catholic? The other 2 are Jewish. Where's the rest of everybody else being represented? It's not in the Supreme Court. 78% of the court is Catholic when 21% of the country is Catholic. You need to think about this, folks. This is an agenda. It's time we restructure the Supreme Court. It's been a long time coming. Lifetime appointments? That should be gone. We need better representation at every level of government. And I guess I would start with the Supreme Court. And I also want to get to this. This is an opinion piece published at Bridge Magazine by Louis Steigerwald. He is the superintendent of the Norway Vulcan area schools in the Upper Peninsula. They note on here that the views he expresses are his own, not that of his school district. This was published December 14th. As a superintendent in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, I am concerned that school officials in Oxford may be judged unfairly, considering the laws and regulations that cover Michigan's schools. It was inevitable that, following the horrific shooting in Oxford High School, that a search for folks and systems to blame would begin. With the lawsuits being brought against the district, we have entered this stage of the aftermath of the tragedy. If we are to be fair, however, it is vital that we examine the realities faced by Michigan's public schools. Ask any school leader about the regular pendulum swings regarding schools, and you'll likely get 2 earfuls. In the span of my career, we've gone from mandated zero-tolerance policies to the current requirements on schools to take all possible steps to keep from suspending and expelling students. Under the current pressure not to remove kids from school settings, the personnel at Oxford likely made the best decision they could make. Oxford counselors were faced with a student who reportedly had no prior disciplinary record, and with parents who reportedly resisted cooperating with the school to the point of leaving the school building and refusing to take their child with them. Counselors were then left with a child who had made and written upsetting remarks, but who appeared calm. He had an interest in guns, and school officials would later learn there was at least 1 gun in his home. However, those facts alone are not in any way unique in American culture. Children are surrounded by images of guns on television, in movies, and in video games. I am not blaming these realities for what happened. Rather, I am indicating that an interest in guns and guns being present in a home can hardly be considered unusual considering our society. Go ahead and imagine if a legislature were to pass a law requiring schools to remove any student who showed an interest in guns. Now consider recent requirements on schools to not suspend or expel students for fear of retribution from the state. Schools are now required to use removal from a school setting only as a last resort and are further required to walk through a checklist of considerations before suspending a student. All of this was intentionally done in order to force schools to avoid removing students from school, and schools understand that message. Consider further that it is not unusual for adolescent or even younger students to say stupid things. Imagine the 5th grader on the playground who becomes upset by something and tells a peer, "I'm going to kill you," or even shoot you. Should this student be expelled? Take this a step further and let the student be a special education student. Such an outburst by such a student might be considered a manifestation of the child's disability. If so, the school will be required by law to return the student to the classroom. If there is a zero-tolerance mandate for such utterances, the state of Michigan better be required to figure out how to educate a rather large number of children who will be barred from school buildings. Young people are often quick to anger over things adults would not be upset by, and to then utter empty threats toward others. We recognize this as a reality of developmentally immature behavior. Oxford personnel were faced with a set of choices that have largely been prescribed by laws and mandates on schools. Schools everywhere in Michigan are faced with the same requirements. Oxford counselors faced a calm student who had an interest in guns, which is in no way unique in America, irresponsible and defensive parents, again, not unique, and a set of laws and requirements that favored returning the child to the classroom. I want to be clear, this is not anti-gun screed. Many Americans hunt responsibly. I have guns in my own home with trigger locks and have taught my children how to handle firearms responsibly. Instead, my intent is for folks to be able to judge the school personnel in Oxford fairly while considering the realities required of schools. If we want different decisions in the future, schools need different mandates and guidelines. And I guess that's something that we forget about in our anger over 4 students being murdered at school. Let's go on to our next story. This is Eleanor Watson and Robert Laguerre writing for CBS News. This is dated December 15th out of Washington. More than 80 of the defendants charged in relation to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol have ties to the U.S. military. Most of those with a military background were veterans. This should start scaring the hell out of you folks. A CBS News analysis of service records, attorney statements, and court documents has found that at least 81 current or former service members face charges and are accused of participating in the mob that led Congress to temporarily halt its counting of the 2020 presidential election's electoral college votes. The Justice Department has so far charged more than 700 individuals in connection with the Capitol breach. Well, let's just call it what it was. A traitorous storming of the Capitol. These people were traitors. They wanted to overthrow the incoming government. Let me continue. While an overwhelming majority of those with military ties were veterans when they were charged, at least 5 were currently in the military when they participated in the attack. 1 was an active duty Marine, and 4 were part-time troops either in the Army Reserve or the National Guard. Court documents assert another alleged rioter was attending basic training for the United States Air Force at the time of an August 2021 interview with the FBI following his alleged participation in the January 6th attack. In all, at least 36 have served in the Marine Corps, 28 in the Army, 3 in the Navy, 5 in the Air Force. Marine Major Chris Warnegiris is the only active duty member of the military to have been charged for participating in the January 6th Capitol attack so far. Investigators say in their statement of facts that Warnegiris was the first among a group of rioters to push himself through the doors of the Capitol East Rotunda, where officers are said to have just lost ground to rioters already inside the building who were attempting to prop open the doors. Once Warnegiris was inside, other rioters followed. One by one, prosecutors also said, each fighting and pushing their way past officers attempting to guard the Capitol entrance. Warnegiris pulled people from the mob inside as he positioned himself in the corner of the doorway, using his body to keep the door open, according to the government's initial charging documents. When a U.S. Capitol police officer tried to shut the doors of the building, Warnegiris allegedly resisted and instead pushed the officer away to keep the door open, according to investigators' review of security and open-source videos from that day that is described in court documents. A subsequent FBI interview with the officer in question, also described in the court documents, revealed that after being shown a screenshot of one of the videos, the officer recalled trying to push Warnegiris out of the way and Warnegiris pushing him back in an effort to maintain his position in the open door. The Marine is not accused of anything more physical or dangerous than pushing back, his legal defense team argued in documents filed with the court. They also pointed to the FBI interview where the officer said he did not realize Warnegiris was fighting to push the door open until he saw the screenshot from the video of the alleged incident. Warnegiris has pleaded not guilty to multiple violent crimes, including assaulting or impeding officers at the Capitol, and now faces a superseding indictment. Warnegiris has been a Marine since 2002 and was most recently stationed at Camp Quantico in Virginia. A board of inquiry was held at Marine Corps Base Quantico earlier this year for Warnegiris to argue his case to stay in the Marine Corps. The outcome is pending. Army Specialist James Malt's case is unusual in that he enlisted after his alleged participation in the January 6th attack. He was taken into custody on the morning of Thursday, October 7th at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina, according to a spokesman for the base. The Army said in October that it was not aware of Malt's participation, and the Army would continue to work closely with the FBI when making enlistment decisions. According to charging documents, the FBI had interviewed Malt about his participation in the rioting in mid-January. Malt, who was 29 at the time of his arrest, joined the Army in May and was serving as a combat engineer. He had previously been a Patriot operator in the Army before he left active duty with the rank of sergeant in 2016. From 2016 to March 2020, he was a combat engineer in the New York Army National Guard. According to the charging documents, Malt admitted that he had traveled to Washington, D.C. for Donald Trump's January 6th rally with 5 friends and told investigators he had worn a distinctive hard hat, quote, because he was aware of Antifa attacking Trump supporters after events in Washington, end of quote. He said he thought the hat would offer some protection. The FBI said there was no indication that Antifa was involved in the January 6th attack. Yeah, because Malt was lying his ass off. Malt has been charged with multiple crimes related to his alleged actions on January 6th, including 1 count of assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers with a dangerous weapon, and 1 count of engaging in physical violence in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon. In that January interview, court documents explain that Malt described being caught up in the crowd and the mass of people pushed him closer and closer to the Capitol building. Malt claimed to have no choice but to move forward because of the press of people behind him. He could have just moved out of the way. He should have zigged when he zagged, I guess. I don't know. Investigators say that Capitol security and body-worn cameras and publicly available videos collected from that day show Malt and his co-defendant, Cody Mattis, confronting law enforcement officers at a barrier leading up to the Capitol and apparently climbing high above the crowd before pointing canisters at law enforcement, spraying them with contents. In an FBI interview, Malt acknowledged witnessing law enforcement officers being assaulted and property destruction, but he has denied assaulting anyone or damaging property during the attack. He has entered a plea of not guilty. Thomas Webster, a Marine Corps veteran and retired New York City Police Department officer, has been indicted on multiple counts, including assaulting a police officer with a large metal flagpole carrying a red U.S. Marine Corps flag attached to it. According to investigators' statement of facts, Webster yelled at the officer, quote, "You fucking piece of shit, you fucking commie motherfuckers, man," end of quote, and then lunged toward him with the metal flagpole. Investigators describe in charging documents a violent struggle between the former Marine and the officer, alleging videos show Webster tackled the officer to the ground before further assaulting him. Court documents say that Webster can be seen pinning the officer to the ground and straddling him while he tries to forcibly remove his face shield and gas mask. During an FBI interview following the assault, the officer who was allegedly attacked by Webster described the violence, explaining that he was, quote, choked by his chin strap and was unable to breathe during this portion of the assault, end of quote. Investigators say they later identified the veteran in part by interviewing an administrator at the school his child attends. The school said he regularly drops his child off at school. Webster, who recently faced a second superseding indictment, is scheduled to stand trial in April for his alleged role in the Capitol attack. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. According to court documents on the public docket, Webster intends to use body camera and publicly available videos to argue at trial that he was acting in self-defense on January 6, alleging excessive force was used against him by the officer prior to any act or allegation for which Webster is charged. The Defense Department did not respond to a request for comment on this report. However, alarmed by the involvement of veterans and military service members in the assault on the Capitol, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered a one-day stand-down in the spring to discuss extremism and subsequently formed the Counter-Extremism Working Group. It has been tasked with updating the Pentagon's definition of extremist activity and adding training on extremist groups that might try to recruit former service members, as well as transition checklists for those leaving military service. The group is also standardizing entrance questionnaires to root out applicants with previous extremist behavior. Well, some of the extremist groups they need to start looking at include racist groups like the KKK, because all of these white supremacist hate groups, they're recruiting from the military and the police departments. And that's something we have talked about multiple times on this show. And I want to get to this story. This is Dartenoro Clark, Ali Vitali, and Haley Talbot writing for NBC News. This is dated December 15th out of Washington. Representative Jim Jordan's office confirmed Wednesday that the Ohio Republican was one of the lawmakers whose text messages to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows were released this week by the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The acknowledgement comes 2 days after the January 6th committee made public numerous documents, including text messages, provided to the panel by Meadows. The House committee revealed several text messages sent to Meadows by GOP lawmakers, but did not name any of them. Jordan's office said Wednesday that the message cited by the panel on Monday was a forwarded text and that it was truncated by the committee. The text message from Jordan to Meadows released by committee on Monday read, quote, "On January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as President of the Senate, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all." End of quote. Jordan's office said the shortened version misrepresented the content of the text with an inadvertently placed period. The January 6th committee acknowledged trimming the text before making it public. Spokesman told NBC News on Wednesday, quote, "The Select Committee is responsible for and regrets the error." End of quote. Here's what the full text read. Quote, "On January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as President of the Senate, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all, in accordance with guidance from Founding Father Alexander Hamilton and judicial precedents. No legislative act," wrote Alexander in Federalist Number 78, "contrary to the Constitution can be valid. The court in Hubbard v. Lowe reinforced this truth. That an unconstitutional statute is not a law at all is a proposition no longer open to discussion." And then they cite the court cases involved in that case. Following this rationale, an unconstitutionally appointed elector, like an unconstitutionally enacted statute, is no elector at all. End of quote. Politico reported on Jordan's text message earlier Wednesday. Joseph Schmitz, a conservative lawyer and one-time national security advisor on Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, sent the legal theory to Jordan, who then passed it on to Meadows, a source familiar with the matter told NBC News. The text reveals another instance of how those in Trump's orbit were pressing the White House to challenge the counting of electoral votes on January 6. Jordan has been a staunch Trump ally and was one of the Republican lawmakers tapped by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, to serve on the January 6 committee. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat California, rejected Jordan and another Republican offered by McCarthy, who later pulled his picks. Pelosi later added 2 GOP lawmakers, Representatives Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, to the 9-member committee. The January 6 committee this week also released texts from 3 Fox propaganda channel hosts and Donald Trump Jr., showing they had urged Meadows to get Trump to call off the rioters during the attack on the Capitol. By the way, just as an aside, that same night, those Fox propaganda channel hosts blamed Antifa for what happened. So there's the latest on that. Well, folks, it is time for me to get out of here. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. For Jack Prince and Katie Steele, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.